Your elevation to judgeship has been deferred 4 times over without explanation.
The fact that my partner of 20 years is a person of foreign origin and hence maybe a security risk. Now, that is such a specious reason that it leads one to believe that that is not the whole truth. So that's the reason I believe my sexuality is the reason why my candidature has not been considered for the post of elevation to a judge. One of India's greatest judges, if I may say so, Justice Vivian Bose, had an American wife. The current foreign minister has a foreign wife. Having a foreign spouse is not obviously a disqualification. But having a foreign partner to whom you cannot, under the laws of this country, get married because same-sex marriage is not allowed, that is a disqualification.
If and when he is confirmed, he will be India's first openly gay judge.
So it's a great sacrifice, both financial and personal, when you become a judge. But I think it's a great calling. But also for the community, I felt, for the queer community, it was important to have a role model.
Mr. Saurav Kripal has been practicing law for about 2 decades, focusing on fundamental rights. And he was also the counsel of Nafeez Johar in the case that eventually led to the decriminalization of same-sex relationships in India. He was, back in 2017, recommended for elevation as judge to the Delhi High Court. Now, from 2017 till today, that recommendation has not been confirmed. And the reasons are not entirely clear. In recent news, the Chief Justice of India, S.A. Bobde, has written a letter to the central government, giving it 4 weeks to provide additional information on Mr. Kripal's case as to why he has not been confirmed from the government's end as a judge. The question we have to ask is this, right? Saurav Kripal is also openly gay. And is that in any way impacting his confirmation as judge? Because if and when he is confirmed, he will be India's first openly gay judge. And that is a massive thing. He's agreed to speak with us today after a very long day. He's decided to make some time, which is fantastic. So I'm really happy to have him join us this evening. Mr. Kripal, good evening, and thank you for joining us. Thank you for giving me your time. You've actually been fairly open about this, but we do also know that the process of confirming judges in our country is not entirely transparent. Could you tell us, based on the conversations that you have had, what reasons have you been given for the last 3 or 4 years of your appointment sort of being dangled and kept hanging?
Well, thank you for having me, Faye, first. You really hit the nail on the head when you said that there is no clarity as to how judges are appointed in our country. And you asked me as to what conversations I've had so that I can give better clarity. Now, part of the problem is that the conversation I have with the collegium as a whole is fairly non-existent because the collegium acts on its own on the basis of reports that it receives from the Intelligence Bureau or other sources that it gets, which are never made public, and no real interaction happens between the person whose name has been sent up for elevation on their views on the Intelligence Bureau report. So frankly, I have had no formal discussion really, because none is ever done with any of the members of the collegium. So my information really comes from ad hoc informal sources, including from the media, as it happens. So that is the first problem, is that if there is an issue that the collegium has based on any report of the Bureau of Intelligence or indeed any other intelligence agency, it's never put to me. So I don't really know the exact reason other than my inference from, as I said, sources that let out a few bits of information here or there, none of which can always entirely be reliable. But I suppose the media does a good job and it reported on the issues, and I take their word for it.
You have spoken in the past and said you believe that this delay is due to your sexual orientation. Could you tell us why then you believe that to be true?
Right. Well, there's a direct and an indirect reason. You said, who have I had a conversation with? Not one particular judge, Justice Madan Lokur, who was not actually in the collegium now, but he was when my name was first considered. He's since retired. There was a similar panel discussion as this, discussing the book that I'd written. And their question was posed saying that, why is it that I believe that my sexual orientation has been one of the reasons causing not the fact that my elevation has not been considered or deferred on several occasions. And just as I was about to answer that and give my reasons as to why I thought so, Justice Lokur jumped in and said that when he was a member of the collegium, felt that that was exactly the reason why the decision was deferred. And this is available in the public domain, so I don't really have to make second guesses about it. So that's the direct evidence, so to say, that I have on this front. And the second is that the alleged reason given in the media is so flimsy, which is that the fact that my partner of 20 years is a person of foreign origin and hence maybe a security risk. Now that is such a specious reason that it leads one to believe that that is not the whole truth, right? Now, I assume that is the real reason because, again, as I said, I've not had access to the IB report. I just read about it from the media. But if that be the reason, it doesn't seem to me a good enough reason to defer the consideration one way or the other. I'm not saying appoint me, but at least consider and take a call, right? So that's the reason I believe my sexuality is the reason why my candidature has not been considered for the post of elevation to a judge.
Mr. Kirpal, there have been media reports that talked about the fact that the IB, which is the Intelligence Bureau, which does a background check on anyone before they're confirmed to judgeship, suggested that because your partner is a foreign national, they aren't able to get full information. Now, this is, I'm reminding our viewers, a media report of a Intelligence Bureau report that was never made public. But having a spouse or a partner who is a foreign national has not been a problem in the past, has it?
No, it hasn't. And that is an instance of direct discrimination on the ground of sexuality. I'll explain why. Had I been a straight person, I would have been able to marry my partner. There is no question about it in our minds. We've been, as I said, together for 20 years. We live in Delhi with my parents. I'm out to my parents, friends, family, everybody. He's accepted as a member of our family. The only thing missing or lacking in our relationship is that formal imprimatur of the law declaring us spouses. Now, had I been heterosexual, been married to my spouse, the fact of the foreign origin of my spouse would not have been an issue, surely. And the reason I say that is that I would not be the first judge to have a foreign spouse. One of India's first judges and one of India's greatest judges, if I may say so, Justice Vivian Bose, had an American wife. He was really a brilliant man. The current foreign minister has a foreign wife. So having a foreign spouse is not obviously a disqualification. But having a foreign partner to whom you cannot, under the laws of this country, get married to, because same-sex marriage is not allowed, that is a disqualification. It's perceived to be a security risk. And I ask myself the question as to what is the state secret that is ever revealed to a high court judge that can lead to there being any security risk. I can't, the mind boggles, but there must be something, I suppose.
Do you believe this discrimination, as you have called it, is it stands against the judgment of 2018, where the Supreme Court clearly said that members of the LGBTQI community should not be discriminated against in any field of work or in schools or in colleges? Is this a live example of how that discrimination comes in the way?
Well, on the assumption that this is the reason, the sexuality is the reason. Look, I'm a lawyer, right? So I will always put some caveats and disclaimers first. So, and given the opacity of the system, one has no option but to do that. If that is the reason, then yes, I think one of the fundamental things the judgment in 2018 said is that being a homosexual is not just about the sexual act you perform in the privacy of your bedroom. It's more than that. It's about the right to equality, the right to dignity that the Constitution guarantees every citizen of our country, right? And the fact that I have a freedom to choose, I have autonomy of my own partner in life, not just for sex, but my partner in life. And if that be the case, and if I've chosen a partner, then surely any attempt to discriminate on the ground of who I have chosen as a partner is, in effect, a violation of the judgment in spirit and certainly also in letter of the 2018 judgment. So I think there is no doubt in my head that that is the case, that there is a violation of the judgment.
Mr. Kirpal, I understand that your elevation to judgeship has been deferred 4 times over without explanation. Would you give us an understanding of what would normally happen? Is there an explanation offered every time there's no confirmation? Is it a binary yes or no? Or does this happen a lot where you just roll from year to year without really getting an answer?
Well, it's not common, let's put it that way. In fact, it's highly uncommon. So the typical process is either a yes by the collegium or a no, right? It is on occasion deferred to get certain further information and very exceptional circumstances, in which case, upon receipt of the information, the collegium will take another decision. What happens after the collegium says yes is another matter, because then it goes back to the government, which can send it back, etc. We leave that aside for a moment. But your question specifically is as to what the collegium typically does. So it's either typically a yes or a no, or a deferment waiting for an answer. Now, what appears in my case is that it was a deferment of the third sort that I said, waiting for an answer. It's just that the government has not responded yet to the queries that were posed to it. And that's why it's been deferred from time to time. And on the last occasion, it was deferred from January of 2019 till March of 2021, almost for 2 years, waiting for a response from the government, which never came, which is what apparently and allegedly prompted the Chief Justice to write to the government asking for their inputs so that the collegium could take a decision on the information that they were supposed to give the government. It said the government hasn't given the information that the collegium wants, but it's not common at all. I don't know of any other instance where it has been deferred so often.
If I may ask you, with your permission, a few personal questions. Now, in spite of being deferred 4 times over so many years, you haven't given up, though. One would have expected people to say, okay, you know what, this is not happening. I'm not going to put myself through this anymore. But you're holding on. Could you tell us why?
The reason I've not withdrawn my candidature or consent, as they say, not candidature, because you're asked, you don't propose your own name, right? So I never asked to become a judge. I was asked to. The reason I never withdrew my consent was the very reason that I agreed to be a judge in the first place. I come from a privileged background, Faye. I have all that most of Indians don't have in terms of money, in terms of societal presence, etc. And I felt it was important as a person with all that I have got from the profession and even otherwise from the country to give back something. For the populace at large, that I would be a judge trying to do justice to every citizen, but also for the community. I felt for the queer community, it was important to have a role model, to be there and to let every queer person, every gay, boy, lesbian girl, transgender child, think that they too could reach the same position. And that's why we have role models. So that's why I accepted it, because it is not an easy option to become a judge. It's a very difficult life. I've seen it close and personal. You have no money. Your salaries are abysmal. You have no freedom. You can't meet anybody that you wish to meet. You have to be very circumspect about who you meet. So it's a very close range of friends and family. You can't be seen in public. You can't be seen doing certain things. Your life is very hemmed in. So it's a great sacrifice, both financial and personal, when you become a judge. But I think it's a great calling to become a judge. As you know, you have the power to sentence a person to death when you become a judge. So that's why I chose to become a judge. And it was a solemn oath to myself and promise to myself that I try to do good. Now, just because the going became tough, there's no reason for me to waver from that particular reason that I had when I first accepted judgeship. I knew it was not going to be easy. There hadn't been any gay or queer judges before me. So somewhat it was going to be a bit of a trek, so to say. I just didn't expect it to be a 4-year-long trek. But it doesn't matter. If we don't persevere, and if those of us who have the options don't persevere, we won't make it easier for the next person. And even if I don't make it through, I hope my example will make it easier for someone, sometime, somehow, somewhere, to come through and become a judge of the High Court. And hopefully one day, hey, the Chief Justice of India. Why not? Some other person must be.
You did say that you've seen the life up close, and I believe you're referring to your father, Justice B.N. Kirpal, who served as Chief Justice of India. Does he have an opinion on this situation? Have you?
Yes. Well, I think he was one of the few people who first told me to become a judge. And then after this deferment, a very large number of my mentors, I won't name them, but my father is certainly one of them, did tell me that it's about time that you let this go. It's enough. You live your life. You have the money. You live freedom. But I didn't do this asking anybody whether I should or not. So equally, I don't believe that no matter who the person is in my life, I'm going to answer to my own conscience. If I do become a judge, I won't decide depending on what anyone else thinks. And this is just another instance of that. They think only of me. And that's why they want me to withdraw my consent. I never thought of myself when I accepted this. This was never about me. This was always about something much bigger than that. So, and that still remains. That hasn't changed. It's not as though some other gay person has become a judge. It's not as though discrimination against gay people has disappeared. So as long as the problems stand, for which I gave my consent, I see no reason to withdraw that.
When I'm asking this question because you've dealt with human rights so extensively, there were these 3 judgments that came out in 1 year, in 2018. There was obviously Section 377, there was the Sabrimala judgment, and then there was the adultery judgment, which all of us, I remember in the newsroom, read really carefully, all 300, 400 pages of those judgments, including, the smaller notes that were written by the judges. There was a sense of optimism when we were reading those things. If you compare 2018 to where we are today, is there still a sense of optimism for you personally when it comes to human rights? And especially rights of minorities, so gender minorities, sexual orientation minorities, religious minorities. Is there still oppressed caste? Do you still feel that sense of optimism?
Look, I think one has no option but to have optimism because there is no alternative way. And it sounds like a cop-out, but it isn't really. And I'll tell you why. For instance, a Supreme Court of 34 judges will always have some judges who are more conservative and some judges who are more liberal. And there will be ascendancy of the liberal wing of the bench, and there will be ascendancy of the conservative bench of the court. And that will happen in waves. That will come and change. It'll wax and wane the way the futures of all our lives are. So while you may feel despondent at a particular point of time that it is no longer the same liberal court as it once was, it won't take much for it to become liberal court again. It depends on the people. And there are some very liberal judges on the Supreme Court. So I do have hope that it is a liberal court. And, at the time when the 377 judgment and these great judgments were given, there were some other judges on the bench at that point who probably were anything but liberal. So I'm not as despondent as it might be. Also, I believe there are high courts. Sometimes we talk of the Supreme Court as the only court of the land. And it isn't. The high courts are courts of great power. When the Nas Foundation judgment came in 2009, I believe that is the judgment. The High Court judgment triggered a sexual revolution in our country, which really freed the queer community from the closet. It wasn't the Supreme Court judgment of 2018 which did it. To lead to the point in 2018 when the judgment of 2018 could have been pronounced the way it was and have widespread acceptance the way it did, needed the groundwork of the 2009 judgment of the High Court.
Yes.
And I honestly believe the High Courts today are extremely liberal institutions. and they are standing up to be counted for rights of the oppressed minorities, be it sexual or otherwise. And I have hope and I have faith. Faith.
I'm happy to hear that. I also want to quickly ask you that in that judgment that the Supreme Court gave us back in 2018, the court also instructed the government to write out regulations preventing and outlawing any sort of discrimination against the members of the LGBTQI community in different spaces. Those regulations have not come. And, there is now this sense of, yes, we tolerate, but no, we don't accept. So within housing communities, societies, members of the community are not allowed to rent. They're not allowed to move in. They're bullied at work. They're bullied in college. They're bullied in school. Why hasn't the government been more compelled to follow the instructions of the Supreme Court? I mean, one would assume if the Supreme Court is given an instruction, just to be followed immediately.
Well, I think what you're referring to is the order of Justice Nariman, where he said that the judgment should be pronounced and given widespread publicity. So there was no specific direction to come out with regulation, but of course, the judgment itself is a set of regulations, of constitutional regulations as to what is to be done. But there I don't necessarily blame the government alone. It is also fact of what society is. A judgment is not a magic wand that will just be waved around and society will change. If there are endemic forms of discrimination in society, each battle has to be fought on its own terms, right? So we have to move the court constantly for ending the discrimination that needs to be done. As regards why the government hasn't done its bit, I simply point to the fact that the government, it's not as though it's discriminating against sexual minorities. They're even discriminating against women. There is no law in India which today prohibits private persons from discriminating on the grounds of sex. We have Article 14, which prohibits the state from discriminating on the grounds of sex. So the state cannot say, I will not hire you, you're a woman. But there is no equivalent law or regulation enacted by the legislature in the last 70 years, which says that no private institution can discriminate on the ground of sex. And if the government hasn't thought it fit, or the legislature hasn't thought it fit for the last 70 years to come to the aid of 50% of the population, i.e. women, I think to expect them to come to the aid of sexual minorities is a pipe dream. It's just that human rights are not an important issue in our country. They're just not. I think we don't seem to be bothered by the fact that people's lives can be changed for the better by the law and are in fact in a pretty miserable shape because the law doesn't come to their aid. The fact that there has been no discussion as to why we don't have an anti-discrimination legislation in the last 70, why do we not? Our constitution has this golden principle of equality. But that, as I said, is only for the state. Why has that not filtered down into our daily lives through the enactment of a legislation, which is a simple thing to do? But no one's talking about it because we don't care.
I want a message from you to all of the young members of the LGBTQI community who are watching this video. Also, I'm very proud of the fact that I have a fairly strong audience of them, so they'll definitely hear this. What is your advice to someone young who has perhaps not fully come out to their entire social circle or their parents, who's wondering what life will be like? Will they ever find a partner? Will they ever find commitment? Will they ever find a career where they're accepted for who they are in their offices, or will they have to continue to hide, in some sense of trying to fit in? If you were to talk to these young people today, what would you tell them?
I'll tell them that I know it's not easy to come out. It's very difficult. It's a personal journey for everybody to do. But to stay in the closet is to guarantee yourself a lifetime of unhappiness. You may have you may have big problems when you do come out, right? But I can assure you that will pale into insignificance when you compare that to a lifetime of hiding your own self, from your friends, from your family. So the first thing is you have to come out, find the courage, do that. Now, when the right time is, it's never a right time. but try to find the best time you can. But know that it will not be easy, but it won't be as hard as you think it is, because India of 2021 is not the India of what I was when I was growing up. Society is a lot more accepting than you'd ever think. People love you. See the judgment of 2018, right? The Navtej Johar judgment. Now, if India was a very regressive place, they would have been burning effigies of the judges on the streets.
Yeah.
But the one thing I saw was a universal acceptance of the judgment. There was no sniggering about it. There was no talk about, look, what's happened, it's horrible. From the most conservative to the most liberal, there was just an almost casual acceptance of the judgment. And that's a good thing. That shows that the country you're living in will not just tolerate you, they accept you, and soon they'll get to love you as well.
All right, Saurabh Kripal, thank you so much for speaking with us. I do hope that the wait ends soon, and you do, in fact, have that elevation to judgeship of the High Court of Delhi. And we can then proudly say, we'll rename this video to India's first openly gay judge when that does happen. And we all look forward to the day. I wish you very, very good luck.
Thanks for having me, Faye. And I hope, even if I don't, there's someone in your audience today who's hearing this who will be India's next gay judge. And as I said, hopefully the Chief Justice of this country.
Let's hope so. Thank you. Thank you, and good night.